There was just one chance for Burt Reynolds to leave an impression on Johnny Carson as he took the stage for the first time on The Tonight Show. Wow, he was successful. One of the most memorable late-night moments ever was created by the electrifying chemistry between the two. An iconic video that has captivated audiences for half a century. There was a darker tale, though, and no one knew about it behind the jokes and on-air chit-chat. Reynolds believed it was time to come clean about his affair with Carson right before he died. It was an untold truth, a perspective that not even the most ardent followers had ever been told. If you want to know what really went down between these two icons, you have to watch this film. Once you do, you will never see those iconic Tonight Show moments in the same light. The multi-ethnic family of Lansing, Michigan native Burt Reynolds can trace his ancestry back to a wide variety of places, including the Netherlands, England, Scotland, and even Cherokee and Italian ancestry. He was born on February 11, 1936, despite his repeated assertions that he was born in Waycross. Although he was born in Georgia, Reynolds later admitted that he was actually born in Lansing. His family had relocated there when his father was drafted into the military. Because his father was in the military, Reynolds was constantly on the move as a child. After relocating to Riviera Beach, Florida in 1946, Reynolds befriended Dick Hauser, a man he would be friends with for the rest of his life. Reynolds, who was once known as Buddy, went on to play high school football and receive all-state recognition. He excelled as a halfback while attending Florida State University on a full scholarship. Unfortunately, he suffered permanent injuries in a vehicle accident and a knee injury, which ended his potential football career. After taking a break from school to get well, Reynolds is back at Florida State. However, following a crushing defeat in 1957, he decided to retire from sport. The transition from sports to acting began with this, and Reynolds would go on to become an iconic figure thanks to his charisma, humor, and rugged good features. His legendary career was born out of his early tribulations. Reynolds' rise to Hollywood stardom was fraught with difficulty. In 1958, he began modestly, scoring brief guest appearances on TV shows including Pony Express, Schlitz Playhouse, and Flight. It seemed like he was finally breaking through when he joined Riverboat and appeared in 20 episodes with Darren McGavin. Reynolds possessed an uncommon charisma that captivated audiences. He was fierce and charming at the same time. His real home was obviously on television, though he did try his hand at Broadway in 1961 with Look We've Come Through. A number of classic television series, including Naked City, Route 66, Perry Mason, and The Twilight Zone, featured him as a guest star shortly after his return to television. His breakthrough came in 1962, though, when Gunsmoke cast him as Quint Asper, a half-Comanche blacksmith. He proved he was more than simply a handsome newcomer for 3 years by adding heart and grit to the adored series. Reynolds was not content to remain in just one medium at the same time. He dabbled in film, making appearances in films such as Armored Command and Angel Baby. His breakout roles in action films like Navajo Joe and Operation CIA followed his breakout performance in Gunsmoke. He even gave playing the lead role in the ill-fated TV series Hawk a Go. His portrayal of the tough, no-nonsense action hero became more established by the late 1960s, thanks to films such as Shark and 100 Rifles. However, Reynolds' appearances on talk shows in the early 1970s were when the magic really began. He became a fan favorite in an instant thanks to his sharp mind, hilarious sense of humor, and charisma. Fans adored his humble nature, and their interest was further piqued by his public romance with singer Dinah Shore. In 1970, Reynolds landed a role in the police drama Dan August, which was merely a stepping stone to far bigger things to come in the years that followed. Reynolds gained widespread praise for his performance in the 1972 grittier picture Deliverance, which showcased a new intensity in his acting. Still, that same year he became famous for his centerfold in Cosmopolitan. Reynolds fearlessly consented to pose nude on a bearskin rug while grinning mischievously, as the magazine sought to demonstrate that ladies might appreciate a little edginess on par with males. He was forever cemented as a fearless, carefree figure after that photo went viral and started innumerable conversations. It was inevitable that Johnny Carson, host of The Tonight Show, and the other biggest names in television would take notice of his meteoric rise to prominence. Johnny Carson had more than simply hosting duties during that time on The Tonight Show. As a Hollywood gatekeeper, his one arched eyebrow or well-timed laugh could launch careers or derail them. There was more to performing on Carson's stage than just another interview for any performer. Their position in the industry could be redefined at that moment. If you could make Carson laugh and have fun, you would know you were successful. This was something that Burt Reynolds was fully aware of. Reynolds recognized the significance of the offer to appear on Johnny Carson's Tonight Show the moment he received it. It was more than just another TV commercial for the actor sitting opposite from Johnny. It was an opportunity to be witnessed by millions, a rite of passage, and a direct route to fame if executed well. But there was an unwritten code of conduct that all guests were required to adhere to due to Carson's legendary position. Just before making his Tonight Show debut, Reynolds met with Freddie de Cordova, who was Johnny Carson's producer. Freddie imposed the rules on Burt as if he were training him for a covert operation. When you were on Carson's territory, there were several important regulations to remember. In the first place, don't touch somebody too much. That didn't sit well with Johnny. Afterwards, there was the major one. Respect his writing instruments. Last but not least, spare his hair no matter what. It would have been much easier to work with Carson on the show if they had respected his eccentricities. These regulations weren't fictitious. They contributed to the atmosphere that the audience and guests experienced. The audience could sense the joy on the faces of those who respected Johnny's limitations. On the other hand, things may change, and not for the better, if someone crossed the line. Carson kept his cool. When something wasn't quite right, though, unspoken as they were, his expectations were very obvious. The rule that Burt Reynolds was going to violate was really one of these very rules. Never one to play it safe, Reynolds viewed these do's and don'ts as an opportunity for some mischief. Going against the script, he unexpectedly stopped by the prop room to request scissors and a can of whipped cream. Why? Even he was surprised by that portion. Whatever he had in mind, Carson and the audience could be sure it would be a surprise. Reynolds abruptly cut Carson's tie in half as soon as the performance started, after walking onto the stage to shake Johnny's hand. Johnny perfectly capitalized on the audience's laughing by staring at the camera with an expression of extreme incredulity. However, Carson was not going to give Reynolds the satisfaction of being right. A humorous back-and-forth ensued as he resorted to using the scissors to snip off a portion of Burt's shirt collar in response. Despite Freddie's strict orders, Burt proceeded to expose the whipped cream and dab it into Johnny's hair. Carson then proceeded to spread whipped cream over Burt's leather pants, and the two quickly became entangled in a comical squabble, with each competing to outdo the other. Everything that Freddie had cautioned about was in a state of complete disarray. However, the result was a hilarious extravaganza that proved the power of unscripted television. Johnny Carson was not pleased with the tie-cutting joke, even though it was well received by the audience. Carson maintained an air of calm serenity throughout filming, laughing and rolling with the punches. Beyond the scope of the camera, however, the practical joke caused an emotional reaction. It was Carson's well-constructed public persona that brought him fame. His tie was an integral aspect of that persona, not merely an article of apparel. Carson had an emotional interest in tampering with it. Carson kept his composure for the cameras, but when the show concluded, his irritation became apparent to the crew. Reynolds clearly exceeded a boundary, but he never lost his cool or caused a commotion. Although Carson had no problem taking jokes, this prank was more extreme than what most visitors would tolerate. His standards regarding his appearance and personal belongings were widely known. In contrast to his more restrained and specific personality away from the camera, Carson's affable and easygoing on-air character was on full display during the incident. Regardless matter the circumstances, he always exuded an air of effortless confidence on stage. But when he wasn't performing, he liked to keep things calm. Even calm and collected Carson had limitations, as seen by the scissors episode. Burt Reynolds would reveal the prank's impact on their relationship when he opened up about it years later. Carson never forgot that experience, which served as a reminder that even the most famous people had limits, even though it was made fun of. Burt Reynolds started reflecting on his career and the connections that had an impact on it as he grew older, particularly in regards to his time in Hollywood. Among the most illuminating parts was when he discussed his friendship with Johnny Carson without holding back. Reynolds revealed details about their friendship in an emotional interview, shedding light on a closeness that the public didn't quite grasp when it happened. The notorious tie-cutting prank was the subject of one of the most shocking findings. Reynolds initially laughed it off as a harmless joke, but as time went on he began to wonder if Carson had meant it really. He did concede that, although it was a once-in-a-lifetime television event, it affected their connection in the long run. Even though Carson had some personal boundaries, especially about his image and the tiny eccentricities that made him Carson, the famed host gave plenty of room for Reynolds, who was famous for his humor, to express that he may have crossed a line with Carson. The way Reynolds spoke about Carson in his final years made his reflection all the more heartbreaking. Reynolds admitted that there was always some emotional gap between them, even though they joked around and seemed to be quite friendly in public. Reynolds saw that Carson maintained an air of professionalism even when interacting with friends. They respected each other, quite the contrary, but there was an implicit knowledge of limits that permeated their connection. Reynolds had the utmost regard for Carson's genius throughout their partnership, but he was never entirely sure of his own position on a personal level, leading to an atmosphere of subtle rivalry. Johnny Carson and Burt Reynolds' bond extended well beyond their frequent late-night chit-chat. It appeared to be the ideal pairing at first glance. Johnny, who possesses an uncanny capacity to maintain a level head under pressure, and Burt, a legendary, charismatic, and wildly unpredictable Hollywood actor. They were both very famous, but their friendship shed light on the difficulties of Hollywood friendships in general and the pressures of juggling public personalities with private limits in particular. Behind their on-screen personalities, the men were grappling with the burden of celebrity, the demands of the public, and the necessity to safeguard their remaining privacy. Their connection was more than a series of light-hearted exchanges, despite the fact that they seemed to have natural chemistry. People who knew them well could perceive the profound regard they held for each other, despite the fact that there were underlying tensions and even instances of conflict. Despite the joy they shared, they were cognizant of the fragility of their bond. In a world where egos clashed and relationships were challenged by the strong glare of Hollywood lights, their friendship proved that there could still be real moments of understanding and camaraderie. Carson and Reynolds were trailblazers who changed the face of late-night television forever. By letting his guests shine without stealing the show, Carson revolutionized the late-night format with his trademark laid-back wit. In contrast, Reynolds made his appearances more exciting and unpredictable. He had a talent for injecting a lot of energy into even the most mundane conversation, whether it was by playing practical jokes or effortlessly blending in the unexpected. Their connection, incisive humor, and dash of anarchy made for an audience-pleasing dynamic. Their spontaneous approach shaped the development of late-night television and became the norm. For a closer look at their relationship, Reynolds would contemplate the significance of their friendship. They had a more complex relationship than the humorous exchanges they had on The Tonight Show. What appeared to be lighthearted banter turned out to be a complex friendship. Reynolds acknowledged that he never meant for the late-night pranks to be taken seriously, but he did realize that he had gone too far with Carson, particularly in regards to Johnny's more private boundaries. Their bond went beyond simple appreciation for one another's skills, as Reynolds' introspection made evident. Their common knowledge of the difficulties of public life informed it. Their exchanges, which were both entertaining and stressful, show how difficult it is to strike a balance between one's public and private lives, since Carson, despite his charisma on TV, was a person who prized privacy and control. Their time together on The Tonight Show was clearly more than simply a string of funny moments. Looking back, shown here were two entertainment superstars who, despite the challenges of fame, friendship, and respect, managed to create some of the most iconic late-night television ever. Their natural on-screen chemistry served as an example for subsequent generations of talk show presenters. Perhaps most importantly, though, their connection showed that no friendship, no matter how famous, is ever as easy as it appears in Hollywood. Burt Reynolds and Johnny Carson's friendship extended far beyond their cinematic time together. The intricacies and difficulties of friendships among celebrities were mirrored in it in a distinctive way. Their relationship had layers of complexity that became apparent over time, despite its light-hearted appearance and humorous banter at first glance. There was a camaraderie formed by mutual regard, wit, and occasionally friction between Carson and Reynolds, despite their outwardly charming and defiant personalities. Their banter on The Tonight Show was frequently hilarious and full of wit, but it also served as a reminder that even the most famous and polished celebrities have boundaries and preferences just like the rest of us. There was no ambiguity about Carson's well-known aversion to physical contact and interference with his appearance. Reynolds, however, tested those boundaries with his naughty spirit, producing brief instances of friction between the parties. There was an understanding between them, though, despite the awkwardness and arguments. A friendship forged via common ground and an underlying admiration for one another's professional and personal achievements. Their bond had deeper layers than anyone could have imagined from their TV appearances, according to Reynolds' reflections on the friendship in later years. Not everything was ideal. Anxieties and even blunders occurred at times. Honestly, though, this friendship was like a ballet. You had to push each other's limits, laugh at awkward circumstances, and then respect one another's space when you needed it. Their relationship stood out because of how genuine it was, something that is quite unusual in the celebrity industry. The bond between them exemplified the late-night television era, spontaneous, full of unexpected moments of real connection and unscripted. Reynolds and Carson were pioneers in more ways than one. They demonstrated the power of genuine, unscripted connection with viewers. The world of talk shows is still shaped by their legacy, which is characterized by respect, humor, and the occasional boundary push. But in the end, Reynolds was grateful for their friendship. He fondly recalled Carson, praising the wit and spontaneity that had made their time together unforgettable. Reynolds was sensitive to Carson's need for professionalism, despite the fact that the tie-cutting episode had caused some discomfort behind the scenes. Their friendship was defined in part by their mutual appreciation of one another's unique qualities. An iconic symbol of the golden age of late-night television, the interaction between Reynolds and Carson encapsulated the enchantment of spontaneous moments and real-time comedy. Their partnership went beyond a series of entertaining interviews. At an era when late night was still taking shape, it exemplified the unpredictable, boundary-pushing character of television. Reynolds and Carson's friendship became an indelible part of television culture, serving as a subtle but powerful reminder that behind every legendary moment are frequently hidden depths that the general audience may never know existed.